Human development has crowded out much of our native wildlife habitat. But the good news is that you can make a difference without leaving the house. Coming up, we'll show you how and introduce you to a few folks building wildlife sanctuaries right in their own backyard. Next on Georgia Outdoors.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible by a grant from Mary Hall Singleton and by the Imlay Foundation.
Our world is becoming increasingly urbanized, and as we pave our way across the land, native ecosystems are affected. Habitat loss is the #1 cause of wildlife population declines, and over the years, commercial and residential development have pushed a number of Georgia's species to the brink of extinction. But there are a few things you can do around the house to make a difference by making your yard more wildlife friendly. Providing food, water, and shelter for birds, and planting native plants helps attract more wildlife to your backyard, and in the process improves your quality of life. What better place to see an example of a wildlife-friendly backyard than the home of two genuine wildlife biologists? We visited Nathan and Joyce Klaus, an ornithologist and a herpetologist who've done a lot around their 25-acre property to attract all sorts of wildlife.
It's in western Monroe County, and it's 25 acres and an old farmhouse. I've lived here for about 7 years. And you've been here how long?
Almost a year.
Almost
It'll be a year next month.
We have a little Christmas tree farm. We have a lot of fields and hardwoods and pines and chickens, as you can hear. The thing that attracted me was there's a lot of birds here, so I felt right at home.
Nathan installed bird boxes around the property to encourage nesting birds.
Bird boxes, a lot of them we built, or I built, I should say, when I was remodeling my house. I took out a wall, and there's a lot of good lumber in that wall, and so I made a bunch of bird boxes out of it, and over the years they've been used by just about everything you can imagine.
The couple also has a number of bird feeders, which helps to enhance their enjoyment of a wildlife-friendly property.
We use the feeders really just to bring birds into where we can see them. So we have one by our kitchen window where we eat breakfast, and we have one by Joyce's desk, and so she can sit there while she's working and enjoy the birds. And everything else, we really just try to provide the habitat that gives them the food.
We've planted as many native plants as we can, but we did have some existing non-native plants that do not reproduce and recruit into the wild. So they'll stay where they are without spreading out. Things like quince and camellias, you just find them in every Georgia yard. So we've kept those, but several of the landscaping plants we had that are invasive, we've removed.
Another thing you can do around your home to help promote wildlife is to provide water. Nathan installed a small pond in the backyard, which attracts some of Joyce's favorite creatures, frogs and salamanders.
Nathan built the pond for birds to get drinks.
That's right.
And baths, not knowing eventually he would marry a herpetologist.
Yeah.
But I've been really excited about having the pond here. We've heard several species of frogs calling back there.
We're up to almost a dozen, I think.
Yeah.
The couple also plants vegetables on their acreage, and they take great care to make their garden environmentally friendly.
The garden is something I started. When I first moved in, it was just Georgia red clay and was not very productive. And one of the things that I learned how to do is to ameliorate the soil. We've dumped a lot of organic matter, going down to the dump and picking up the mulch that they give away for free. And over time, it's developed a really beautiful color, and it's very friable and very productive. And so we raise a good bit of our food now in the garden.
The cypress mulch is a vector for spreading laurel wilt disease, which affects some native Georgia plant species. And the mulch that we're using doesn't spread it the way cypress mulch does.
whenever we're making a decision about how to manage our land, we try to connect the dots between what we're using and where it came from. And we spend a lot of time talking about what we're going to do. We take a walk on our land at least once a day. I think we both feel that, I guess we're the legal owners of this place, but there's an awful lot of animals that have lived here a lot longer than I have and longer than Joyce has. And so we really try to use as little of it as we can for our own purposes.
I think we feel that we get so much from the land that we want to try to give at least a little bit back.
If you're interested in promoting urban wildlife, you can do things on your own or join a group of like-minded people. The Audubon Society is one of the most active environmental organizations in Georgia, encouraging wildlife-friendly backyards across the state. In Atlanta, residents can have their yards certified as a wildlife sanctuary.
Atlanta Audubon right now has about 3,800 members. Our main goal is to preserve birds and their habitats, and so we try every way we can to get out and preserve green spaces and educational efforts in addition to birding. The backyard wildlife habitat works very well with preserving the habitats. It involves butterflies and birds and also a lot of plants and nature that people enjoy.
Every year, Atlanta Audubon features a tour of exemplary wildlife sanctuaries around the city.
We try to showcase some of the sanctuaries that we've certified that have stood out. It sounds really huge, a sanctuary, but in actual fact it can be a very small thing as well. So the tour is a great way to take people, to inspire them to do more, or people who are already doing something and let them improve.
From open park-like landscapes to more concentrated backyards, a variety of habitats are on display. The first stop on the tour is a landscape very close to downtown Atlanta.
This is a city park which is in the middle of Ansley Park neighborhood, an historic neighborhood which was designed on the theme of Olmsted's parks. So this park we see as a natural pastoral green oasis in the middle of the city. When we started working on the park, there was an enormous amount of kudzu covering whole sections of the park. We had an acre of kudzu in one spot. So a lot of the work has been taking out plant material that's exotic that we don't think of as natural plant material that encourages wildlife.
Exotic species such as kudzu, English ivy, Chinese privet, and most bamboo species are considered invasive exotics, plants brought in from other countries which take over quickly and crowd out native species. When planning your wildlife-friendly garden, you'll want to steer clear of these plant thugs. There are plenty of non-invasive and native plant species which can be just as beautiful in your backyard. The next stop along the Wildlife Sanctuary tour found inspiration in a love of birds and bird watching.
When we moved in, the property was overplanted in lots of non-native hedges, some Japanese hollies and iliagnus and privet and that kind of thing. And over the years, we've eliminated those things and then got really interested in planting the yard to attract birds and butterflies as we became more and more interested in birding. I just am fascinated by watching these little avian creatures right in our own backyard and anywhere else I can get to them.
Next up on the tour is the home of Mary Middlemas, who took a yard that looked like this and transformed it into an urban wildlife oasis.
Our main goal initially was to attract birds and butterflies, mostly butterflies. I've always liked flowers, so we concentrated on that, and as I've learned more, I've tried to put in more natives and things that are, of course, perennial and things that are drought tolerant, so that we don't have to spend all of our time watering. Atlanta's habitat loss is very distressing, and so it's nice to be able to put some of it back.
The final stop on this tour of backyard habitats belongs to Dale Horexy.
It's a double city lot with an older house and a creek running behind the property. We've invested a lot of time and energy in creating a wildlife sanctuary and planting native plants and perennials and annuals and trees in order to attract wildlife. It was definitely overgrown and typical privet. The previous owners had been treating this back area as a lawn. It wasn't really grass per se. The statistic that they throw about 50 acres of woodland being lost every day in the Atlanta area, to me that's reason enough. Anybody and everybody who can do their own little bit to try to maintain some wildness and attract wildlife, just providing a refuge in the city for any animals that you can. I think we have an obligation to try to fight some of the negative things that are going on in our own way.
All of the backyards on Audubon's tour of backyard wildlife sanctuaries were certified under a rigorous set of guidelines. We accompanied certification coordinator Jacqueline McRae as she surveyed 2 backyards vying for the esteemed title.
Good morning. It's Prabha, right? I'm Jacqueline.
Hey.
Nice to see you.
Basically, we want to encourage people to do the right thing for the birds and the wildlife in the Atlanta area and throughout Georgia. So when people express an interest, our goal is to have them consider why the birds are in their garden other than just putting out bird feeders. And so we first ask people to document what they have, and then we try and explain to them how this is helping.
How about you give me a tour? We'll just walk around and see the area that we're certifying then.
Longtime Atlanta resident Prabha Varma learned of the backyard certification program through a neighbor.
You're doing a good job.
This is our 24th year here. One of our neighbors was certified. Since then, I've been wanting to get our property get certified. So I haven't really worked much towards it, but this will give me a chance to really work on it and make sure I have the native plants and not invasive plants.
Oh my gosh, is this all yours too? She had native plants that were kind of smothered by the ivy. The ivy had escaped from somewhere else and it was just out competing everything that she had. When she eventually gets that ivy up, she's going to be surprised by the things that she already has that she can showcase. Just revealing this beech tree or revealing this area here. Move this ivy away and really let those beech trees flourish.
Though there is much work still to be done, in the end, Prabha's yard was determined to be a good example of backyard habitat.
She absolutely got the certification. Her heart's in the right place and she's very aware of the path that she's going to take now, and she's clearly been a good custodian until this point. She had the birdhouses too, and she just looking out for wildlife in general. Here in the city, we're not like 2 miles from I-85, and there she has that wonderful sanctuary. Hi, I'm Jacqueline.
Well, nice to meet you.
Next, Jacqueline made her way to the nearby house of Mary Lou McCleskey, whose manicured yard was quite different.
Just everyone has the same plants, the same 10 things are everywhere, and what we need to do is restore it and try and get 100 different things back here. And if you do that, then you're going to have 100 different kinds of wildlife. Mary Lou has a very typical yard for this area where people put in the pine trees and put in the azaleas, normal stuff but nothing very diverse. I think Mary Lou has recognized this. It looked like she had really been pulling out a lot of stuff. It felt like she had the canvas and she'd left in some of the big pieces, and now she was ready for ideas of things that she could put in there instead that would be really good for wildlife.
We've lived here quite a while. We have about a half an acre. We have a little herb garden and we've grown a few vegetables, and we've done a lot of laissez-faire with a lot of the other plants, or keep it mowed in the middle and see what grows. I've spent a lot of years focusing on my career, and I want to think about my environment a little bit more.
You've done a good thing. You have lots of different feeders, so you have good diversity. The birds are not going to die or starve without us putting feeders out, but they do bring the birds where we can see them. So they're important because they make you realize how many different kinds of birds you actually have. It is important to have feeders in the winter time. You're not going to keep birds from migrating because you had a great feeder. You're feeding the ones that stayed behind that would normally be foraging and trying to find food here. So you're really helping them out. So I'm going to certify you as a wildlife sanctuary. So congratulations.
Thank you.
We certified Mary Lou's property because she had the main components. She's doing the right thing. Her heart's in the right place. It's all about education and inspiration, and then ultimately for us to see where these gardens are and to understand how birds can continue to live here or migrate through here. We hear about all the things that are being destroyed and changed and concreted over, and yet even in your own garden you can make a difference.
Across the state, many communities have instituted citywide programs to help promote green space and wildlife-friendly gardens. On the coast, one place that's making a difference is the Landings, a unique housing development on Skidaway Island near Savannah.
The Landings lies on Skidaway Island. We're located just inside of the barrier islands of Wausau and Ossabaw Island, and we are bordered to the west by the city of Savannah.
We are not a barrier island, but we are surrounded by marsh tidal creeks, rivers, and marsh.
Home to lush coastal woodlands, a variety of wildlife, and an environmentally active community, the Landings is a good example of people interacting positively with the natural world. And like many urban wildlife projects, it all began with a healthy interest in our fine feathered friends.
We started the birding club more than 10 years ago now, and it started with just a handful of people that really were birders even before they moved here. Over time, it's grown. I think we've got yellow warblers here.
The Landings is a popular spot for birds in part because of its proximity to the coastal wetlands, but also because of the unique land management that's applied to the community.
The Landings Association has a tree preservation policy in place. What this does is preserves a lot of our old growth trees and also preserves our canopy.
We've tried to put the native plants in that don't require a lot of upkeep and weeding.
You can't always have lawn under your trees. You need to sometimes have that messy, the palmettos and the wax myrtles and the willows out on the island. You don't want to trim it up and make it all look like Central Park. You want it messy because that's what allows us to bring in the birds.
In addition to underbrush and tree cover, the Landings also boasts a large amount of ponds and lagoons, both man-made and natural.
This is a natural pond that we dug out to make it deeper, and it's been a real attraction for nesting species of birds, primarily the large waders, the egrets, the herons. The water is deep enough here that there are alligators in the pond. The alligators keep the raccoons away from the nests. And in turn, every once in a while, an egg rolls out, a chick dies, falls out of the nest. That's the alligator's reward for keeping the whole colony safe, and it works very effectively.
Another great place to spot birds at the Landings is the sparrow field, the brainchild of Landings resident Russ White.
In the acres and acres of manicured lawn, we've got this very natural setting. This little postage stamp attracts at least 10 species that have never been found on the island, and probably 20 species that are rarely, if ever, found out here.
The field is the result of disturbed land that has been partially reclaimed by native grasses. This habitat is unusual for a coastal island, and as such attracts many unique species of sparrows. Another great way to appreciate the wildlife is through the system of nature trails that weave in and out of the golf courses and residential areas.
That is really pretty.
Some of the most manicured parts of the island are its golf courses. At first glance, these areas might appear to offer very little opportunity for conservation. But in fact, all of the courses at the Landings are Audubon certified.
Audubon certification basically means that you are managing your golf courses in an environmentally friendly way.
In these days of water conservation, maintaining the golf courses in an environmentally friendly manner is especially important. The Landings uses a unique method of recycling to water the courses. They distribute recycled water over spray fields, where it filters through the earth and is reclaimed through shallow wells. This naturally cleansed water is then used for irrigation.
We have upgraded the irrigation technology on all of our golf courses.
They use our lagoon waters in times when we have a decent amount of water falling from the sky And then in other times, when there is not that water available, they can reclaim this water that's applied to the spray fields through a shallow well system.
We actually conserve about 10 or 15% more water with these new irrigation systems that we've installed on 4 of the courses.
The golf courses are also home to another Landings resident, the Bluebird. The Dave Scott Bluebird program places specially made birdhouses all along the golf courses and monitors them regularly, helping to ensure that these feisty little birds always have a refuge to raise their young.
During the hatching season, they would check the boxes about once a day, and they would monitor them until they would fledge.
Volunteers keep a careful count of the bluebirds hatched, a practice that provides clear proof of how successful the program is.
Last year we fledged 809 bluebirds, and this year the count is about 840. So we're increasing each year.
The residents play a huge role as far as with our Audubon Committee being able to impact a lot of the programs that go on at the Landings. They bring in the native plant, native vegetation. They're really kind of our backbone in how we plant and a lot of our policies that we make.
In a time when construction and development continue to spread further and further into the natural places of our state, this community is truly an oasis of smart planning and environmental thinking.
In these days of frequent drought, there are many things you can do to conserve water around your backyard. Here are a few ways to be water smart when caring for your garden and lawn. Plant wisely. Choose plants that are native to your area, are drought resistant, and thrive in your local environment. Mulch. Proper mulch is the key to preventing water loss from your soil, reducing the need for supplemental irrigation, and finishing off the overall attractiveness of your landscape. Collect water. Place rain barrels under downspouts to collect water that can be used to hydrate your landscape without turning on a faucet. For more tips and information on how to conserve water around your yard and in your home, visit the WaterSmart website.
Bird watching and gardening are great ways to experience the joys of nature right in your own backyard during the day. But the enjoyment doesn't have to stop just because the sun sets. Backyard campouts are another way to experience outdoor adventure in your very own yard. Each June, the National Wildlife Federation sponsors the Great American Backyard Campout, a nationwide event designed to make kids aware of the wilderness right outside their door. We joined Sustaining Urban Villages at the Outdoor Activity Center as they hosted their own backyard campout.
This is an awesome opportunity for us to engage youth into a fun activity. And oftentimes in urban areas, even leaving the neighborhood to go camping elsewhere is not something that our kids are necessarily engaged in. We find couch potato syndrome. A lot of kids, their idea of a Friday night is to play video games or the movies, the stereotypical things. We want to highlight there's a whole wonderful world right outside your back door or right across the way a piece in the urban forest that's in your neighborhood.
Hosting tonight's event is Sustaining Urban Villages, an organization dedicated to providing effective social urban development. The Outdoor Activity Center offers children the opportunity to experience the outdoors without ever having to leave the city. Situated on a 26-acre forest in Atlanta, the Outdoor Activity Center offers not only space to camp, but nature trails, a rope course, and organic garden as well.
We focus primarily at this point on green space in the urban areas.
Push that down.
Before tonight's participants can explore this natural treasure in the heart of the city, campers must put up their tents while they still have light. Once the tents are up, it's time for the nature walk, where the campers will have a chance to learn about invasive species, recycling, and organic gardening.
Where'd the water come from? From the rain. It's a recycling method called rain barrel. As it rains, it collects the natural rainwater. Urban forests are very important, especially now where we have more attention on global warming, we have more attention on the types of climate changes that we're experiencing as a result of the climate and the environment being changed.
The Outdoor Activity Center is also home to the Hartnett Community Garden, a certified organic garden maintained by volunteers.
That certification comes as a result of the way that they maintain the garden without pesticides and chemicals. They use crop rotation to make sure the nutrients remain in the soil. For example, if you plant a particular crop in one bed, this year you would wait 3 years before replanting in that same bed the same type of crop.
After the campers have worked up an appetite on their walk, it's time to eat.
We'll have beans and franks, the traditional camp meal. We'll have some s'mores, some granola, some fruit for early morning, plenty of drinks. So it'll be light fare.
Once the campers have refueled, it's time to hit the trail one more time.
When we stop on the trail, we'll turn our flashlights off so we won't scare away the nocturnal things. I think once you're outdoors and you're actually in the natural environment, you have a greater appreciation for it. You have an appreciation for the things that you wouldn't necessarily see inside, for the stars, for example.
After a full evening enjoying the fresh air, the campers are off to bed. For many campers, tonight will be their first time sleeping in a tent.
I hope it's comfortable. It's gonna be, yeah. Not, I'm gonna be pushing people.
In an increasingly urbanized world, it's all too easy to forget what it means to see the stars, to hear the hoot of an owl, or just to enjoy the tranquility of being in nature. Luckily, you don't even need to leave your own backyard.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible by a grant from Mary Hall Singleton and by the Imlay Foundation.